Hello! Well, today we're looking at light aquifers, which is a tutorial by request. Now, things to note about aquifers. There are two types of aquifers: normal aquifers, which we think of as being the heavy aquifer, and the light aquifer. This tutorial specifically deals with light aquifers. Heavy aquifers have been in the game for some time. Light aquifers were introduced with 0.47. Light aquifers are far more common than heavy aquifers. Heavy aquifers have now become quite rare. However, they are still quite awkward to deal with. So in my current fortress, I haven't come across a light aquifer, but in a fortress that I streamed a little while ago, we have got quite a problematic light aquifer. So I'm going to look at the two ways to deal with it. Now, there is quite a lot of carnage in this old fortress here, so please bear with the mess. So it's a problematic aquifer because of where it is. This is a tunnel that leads to the surface, and as you can see, it's very wet down the end. Now let me just show you where this tunnel goes. If we go up and up and up and up, here you see where it breaks the surface. There's been a fair amount of battling around here, so there is quite a lot of stuff strewn. And as we can see, there's water everywhere. Light aquifers don't pour water like the heavy aquifers do. They seep water, and they'll seep water through the walls or through the ceiling if the aquifer is above an empty space. So to deal with the light aquifer in the first instance, we went with method 1, which is the simplest way to deal with it, was to drain the water. So what we have is there's a staircase here, and the water is running down the staircase. There's the ramps here, and the water is running down the ramps. So the water gets quite deep in this tunnel quite quickly, and there was quite a strong flow as well. So what we did was to put a little channel down the edges of the tunnel and down here too, and then to dig out a drainage room underneath. We go underneath, and you can see here are the drainage tunnels. The water can of course pass through the diagonals, and then it just floods out into this big room below. So a light aquifer, although it is constantly seeping water, it actually doesn't seep that much. So this is from possibly 3 layers of aquifer, and it's only reaching this point. So that is adequate. It will stop the tunnel from flooding. It can even be advantageous because it will wash away blood and vomit and, well, any kind of other nasties that you might get. But for us, it's been a bit of a problem using this method because, well, as you can see from the drainage room downstairs, we've had an awful lot of stuff be washed by the water into this room. We've got a sort of tide line here of stuff that's being washed forwards. And while it's not a huge problem, I'd rather that didn't happen. Now, to try and prevent that from happening, what we did was to put down some floor grates. So the stuff won't wash through floor grates, but the water will flood through it. But the problem with floor grates is that they are buildings that can be destroyed by anything that is stood on top of it. And as this is the entrance into my base, and as mentioned, we've had quite a lot of fighting up here. These floor grates have been destroyed by the last invading army of trolls that we had. So we could keep on replacing the floor grates and allowing the water to continue to flood this area and then drain into the channel, and it would be fine. It would do the job. But I'd rather just deal with the aquifer once and for all and not have to have all of this water in my tunnels. So that's what we're going to do today. So first of all, down here, now what we don't know at this point is the aquifer actually on this level? is the water seeping through the walls on this level? We don't know, because it could be that the water is actually seeping through the ceiling from the aquifer level above. And what it could be telling us here is that if we dig out these tiles, the water will come from the ceiling. So what we're going to do is deal with the aquifer on the level above. It should, if we can stop water from coming through the ceiling, then it'll definitely slow down the water. It might be that we need to come back down to this layer and deal with water coming through the walls, but we'll look at that secondary. Right, but how do we stop it coming through the ceilings? Well, what we're going to have to do is to dig out all of the damp rock above it. Let's find out where exactly this aquifer is, or where it's likely to be. If we go to designation and, well, just having mine highlighted, you can see the flashing blue around the edge. So everywhere from here, all around the edge, this is telling us that all of this area is damp stone if we were to mine it. And if we go up, you can see that it's the same around all of those, and up again. Yep, we're still in the aquifer. Up again. Okay, so it appears that this layer here is dry. I think that's the layer below the surface. Yeah, it is. That's the surface there. That's open to the sunlight. The water that we see here might be coming through the walls, or it might be that it's coming from the floor above. And the water that we see here might be coming through the walls, or it might be coming through the floor above. And so because we've determined that there likely isn't an aquifer on this floor, the best thing for us to do is to start with the highest level first. Usually where you're dealing with light aquifers, if you've got a relatively large dig space, you usually get the majority of the water through the ceiling, simply because of the amount of surface area. Now, what we need to do is to make sure that we clear enough of the damp rock above to enable us to clear out the light aquifer in this area altogether. So what we need to do is to dig out an area above here that includes all of this light aquifer, and also gives us room to build some walls around this lower level in case we find we need to. The best thing to do is to start at the top and to reduce the flow of the water from the top down. So we're going to start at this level, but first of all, let's work out where we actually need to dig. So we might have to remove this whetstone here and replace all of this with a wall. So we want to make sure that we remove at least all of this wall space from above. So I'm going to take it a little bit further back than that. We'll take it from, say, this point here. Let's put box select on. And we'll move the cursor. So if we dig from that point there, and we'll go from here, and we're going to need to go across, and we're going to need to go down. So we know that we need to dig in a diagonal along here. And then going back down again, we're going to need to dig out at least to this layer here, to this level here. So let's take it one wider. We'll go from there. Okay, so we're going to have to come along here and up there and in a diagonal that way. Now, because we're going to have to build walls, and building diagonal walls is a real pain, we might as well just dig out a nice big rectangle. So let's work on that basis. We know we're going to need at least that. We'll check where we're going to need to come to here. We're going to have to come out maybe to there. So we're going to want it that wide. We'll bring that whole area inside. Meanwhile, over here, we're going to need to dig out. We might as well do the stairs as well. We'll dig out this area here. Bring that across to there. And we might find that this corner here, because the water is going to be heading towards the stairs and flowing down, we might find that it ends up a bit intense around this corner. So it doesn't actually make any difference to our wall building. We'll just make it one big square like that. And we're going to dig and build walls around that square on this level and the level below. Right, first of all, let's get a miner in here to start digging this out. Something to be careful of when you are digging around light aquifers. If you are digging staircases, they can fill up a staircase very quickly, leaving your dwarves cut off, potentially drowning your dwarves. Okay, the dwarves are here. Aha. Now, you hear the drip sound? Now, we will get the problem of the miners stopping work when they hit damp stone. They'll dig a tile and realise that it's damp, and then they'll cancel the instruction to dig the stone next to it. However, one thing we can do to make life a bit easier is if you go to the LMP and go to the Advanced tab, what I've done is to turn the damp stone announcements to no. And that prevents the pause and zoom function. Now we will have to keep an eye on the dwarves and manually reset the digging instructions, but that's a lot easier than having to deal with the pause and zoom. Right, and I'll come back once we've dug out this whole room. Ordinarily, I would wall it off as we dig, but this time I'm going to let them dig the whole thing out so that we can have a look and see just how wet this room is. Okay, the miners are finished in this room. Now, looking at this, we can see around the edge here, it certainly appears as though the water is seeping through the wall, and that ties up with what we saw from the layer above, where we don't appear to have any aquifer in this area. However, this large area here, I suspect that actually there might be an aquifer above it. So I think we might have a ceiling leak there. But I think if we block off the walls and just prevent the walls from leaking in, that's probably going to be enough to stop this water from spreading out and heading down the stairs and the ramp. So let's get some walls built. I'm going to tell them to build the corners first. Obsidian blocks are fine. Then here, here, and here. We'll just let somebody take ownership of those jobs first. Okay, and now we'll build the rest of the walls. Let's make sure box select is on. I'm going to focus on this top wall here first. That appears to be where we've got more flooding. And then we'll do this bottom one here too. Now, if we dug out a room this size that was leaking from both the walls and the ceiling, this whole room would be flooded with water levels of 1s and 2s, which is why we start from the top. Okay, so work has been completed here. I have rebuilt the ramps that we removed during the dig out. We have had an invasion of grizzly bear peoples, but I was going to let this dry out before I brought you back, but well, it might be full of miasma soon. But as you can see, this corner here is drying out quite nicely. So I think we're safe in that. Looking at this area, I think it's leaking through the roof. So upstairs, this area here must also be a light aquifer. So this is going to keep this area full, but I think we're quite safe. I don't think it's going to spread any further than it's already spread. It's starting to dry back a little bit now because it's not coming through these walls anymore. Now you notice that I have built a wall against solid rock here, and in previous versions you could smooth the wall, a rock wall, to prevent an aquifer from leaking through. Since 0.47, smoothing walls of light aquifers, at least, has not been a guaranteed way to prevent seepage. Sometimes the dwarves just won't smooth the wall of a light aquifer at all. But constructing a wall around the edge of a light aquifer, guaranteed it won't seep through the walls anymore. It will of course still seep through the ceiling. Okay, so our next job now is to do the same thing again, but on this floor. And what I'll do to make it a little bit more productive and to prevent quite so much water is I'll dig and build all at the same time. So what I want to do is to dig to the corners first, but we need to make sure that they're digging a reasonable width so that we don't get too high a flow of water. We need to give it some area to spread out in. So we'll do it from the same corner. We'll do this corner here first. Well, I thought by the time I would get back to show you this that we would still be quite damp. However, while we were building, we've had a goblin siege, a weird mammoth attack, and a vampire, plus an attempted theft of a couple of artifacts. So we've had a bit of a delay, and in that time things have dried out somewhat. So let's have a look at the top. As we can see, it's still quite wet on the top floor, so pretty sure that's coming through the ceiling. We look below though, the little dregs of water that's left here, that is just evaporating. That will dry out completely. There isn't any damp stone above it to leak downwards. So even though there is water above, that doesn't matter as long as it's not damp stone. So it won't drip through the roof. And if we look down here, this now appears to be completely dry. Let's just see what happens if we put the dig designation. There's a little bit of moist stone. There's a little bit of damp stone over there. Probably because it's just extending round, but I don't think we need to worry about that. So we don't actually have to dig out any of the walls here and replace any of the walls because the aquifer is not on this level. But we couldn't tell that until after we dealt with the aquifer above it. So what I could do now is just floor over all of these channels here. But maybe I'll wait until we've cleaned all of the loot out of the channels there. Now, if you want to make sure that you avoid an aquifer, a good thing to check is when you're setting out on your embark is when you're looking at what materials you've got in your embark, don't forget to check all of the different biomes because the aquifer can be biome specific. You may have one in one biome and not another. Now, if the aquifer is only present in a small area of the biome, it might not show up on the list, but it may be there. And a good way to check is to shrink down. Once you've decided which embark area you wanted, is then to shrink down to a 1x1 tile and just move that tile over the area that you're looking to settle in. And if there is a light aquifer in that one tile, you're far more likely to come across it by just looking at a single tile. And here's an example of where we don't see it on one tile, but if we move around a little bit, there we see the light. You're more likely to find aquifers, light or heavy, in the lower area of your maps than the higher areas of your maps. And there is a certain restriction on what kinds of materials, what kind of substrate can contain an aquifer. So all of the sands and loams can hold an aquifer, and certain types of rock as well. Aquifers that are located in an ocean biome will produce salty water, but in ordinary biomes, aquifers will produce fresh water, so they can be useful. You can use aquifers to keep a well filled. You can use aquifers to provide a waterfall inside your base. However, quite where they are going to be is a little unpredictable. You have to engineer your way around them. By and large, my preference is just to avoid them. If I need water, I would rather bring water in from a river or pump it up from the caverns than have to engineer around the aquifers. I hope that's been useful for you. If you have any other tips and tricks on either dealing with light aquifers or even harnessing light aquifers, let me know in the comments and we'll share those hints and tips and tricks around. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.